The Amash Project.
It's Dave Starver, and welcome to another presentation from Revelation Tapes. His name is Dean Wallach.
I was taught how to bring down the Twin Towers using nothing but infrasound.
Really?
Well, we were made to study the experiments by the Russians, the Americans, and the British in the late 50s.
In the late 50s?
Late 50s, this was mid-60s when I was in the military, but here were these joint maneuvers being undertaken in the late 50s by these three superpowers then in the Eastern Bloc, bringing down 25-story buildings using nothing but sound wave infrasound.
Good heavens.
Welcome back to section 2 of the Amash Project, and we're talking here to Dr. Judy Wood, visiting the UK from America, and we're here at Northampton University along with Andrew Johnson. We've been talking in the past about 9/11, and indeed we did a basis series with Andrew Johnson and Tony Farrell talking about 9/11 and 7/7, and now we're going to talk about management perception or perception management. So Dr. Judy Wood made a fantastic statement in the break, and I want her to elucidate on that now. So welcome back, Dr. Judy Wood. And perhaps you tell us a little bit about how you feel 9/11 has affected, well, the whole of the globe, basically.
And it has. Some people think of it as a car wreck that happened 10 years ago where the wrong party got the traffic ticket. Wrong party was blamed, but it actually was an attack on human consciousness around the planet. The entire planet was affected.
I agree.
And it affects people how they see things. For example, why did so few people see what actually happened that day, on that day? I've discovered there's 3 reasons. 1, poor problem-solving skills from the school system, whatnot. 2, peer pressure or groupthink. They want to go along with the herd. And the third thing is terrified of the implications. If they see this, what does it mean? And that scares them back. Any one of those 3 things would prevent them from seeing it. Now, I like to focus on the first thing, problem-solving skills. And there's a real trick to this. It's how, actually, magic tricks are done.
Right.
You first must determine what happened before you can determine how it happened.
Yeah, sure.
If you direct folks to focus on how it happened, or who did it, they're assuming what it is. So they're solving an imagined problem, not the real problem. And then they're focusing on this being the cause, or that being the cause, that being the cause of what? And they go round and round and round and round, argue in circles for years and years and years, and never solve it. That is how they keep the cover-up safe.
And basically the thing is, what did they see? They saw the buildings turn to dust, but because it's not known, we don't have a frame of reference for that either.
They don't look at the evidence. They just argue about, eeny, meeny, miny, moe, these things, and just argue, for pet ideas. But no one has looked at the evidence to determine what happened. And there's the incident that happened a little over a year ago, that court case that was over-publicized big time in the U.S. and I think around the world, about Casey Anthony, the mother who supposedly killed her child.
Oh, right.
The media convinced the public she was guilty. Of what? I'm not saying she's innocent, but the prosecution failed to prove what happened. They didn't know what happened. So how can you convict her of, well, what's the crime? The jury didn't know what the crime was.
Yeah.
And so you first must determine what happened before you can say how it happened or who did it.
Yeah.
It has to be defined. And that is the biggest secret I see for how a cover-up stays in place. So we have all sorts of things that come out about theories of how it was done, but no one looks at what happened. Like, okay, thermite, nukes, mini nukes, mega nukes.
Well, that's an interesting case in point, isn't it? Because we've got a guy like Dr. Stephen E. Jones, who's a physicist, and so I suppose has kudos and standing in the public eye, and has really spoken hugely on the thermite issue. And perhaps maybe we could bring Andrew in on this one, because
I think this goes back to looking at what happened, and and when you get this imagined problem, then somebody can seize upon that and then give the solution to that imagined problem. And I was taken in by this, and I've spoken openly about this thermite issue, which is this substance which is a combination of aluminium powder and iron oxide, which is the exterior of the towers was made of aluminium, and then you had rusting beams which had iron oxide on them. So this was kind of like the sleight of hand in this next magic trick. The main magic trick was the events of 9/11, and then the perception management sort of came in 2005 with the Stephen E. Jones character, and he then put forward this so-called theory, and then he sort of revised it, and all the while he was doing that, people didn't have the problem-solving skills, as Dr. Wood was pointing out, to actually break through that and say, well, that's not actually what happened, so why are you even talking about this as a possible solution? It's irrelevant.
Can I just ask, has Stephen E. Jones brought a case to the Supreme Court about it being thermite?
Not at all, not at all. And
didn't even bring it forth to NIST.
Correct, and when we looked at the documents, and this was something Dr. Wood highlighted to me probably 3-4 years ago now at least, when we looked at the document, they did submit a document to NIST, in other words, this request for correction, which I think was mentioned earlier on in the interview, but when you look at this document, it didn't even mention this thermite in any meaningful way. There was a link to his scientific paper, but outside of that, it didn't reference any passages from this paper, and then later on, they referenced thermite again, but it was from 1996. It was from some fire
so what
damage
does that
research.
tell us? I mean,
well, it tells you that they, they knew that what they were putting out, I think, was fraudulent, because they couldn't submit fraudulent evidence to a court, because that is itself a crime.
Yes, it's a federal crime to defraud the government.
Right. So you can see all these tricks played on people's perception management, and we've looked at this for 6-7 years now, and it's a real distraction
technique, isn't it?
It is, and there's so many techniques, and we've talked about them a lot in our Skype conversations and tried to work out the various strategies that they're using. And we could write a whole sequence of volumes about it, actually.
I would like just to bring in a point here, and Andrew and Dr. Wood, because you mentioned this before as well, that way back in '89, when Pons and Fleischmann were demonstrating the cold fusion principle, which I believe they did, and maybe not in a huge way, but they certainly did, a certain Mr. Stephen E. Jones...
It was the same guy, that's right. The same guy that was involved. And one of the things that we can link together here, what happened at the conference, because what happened at the conference is...
Can I just ask which conference you're
Well, this was the conference at Hilversum, the Global BEM Breakthrough Energy Movement.
Okay, so this was just November 9th, 10th and 11th in Holland.
Correct.
And it was, the Breakthrough Energy Conference.
Correct, the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference.
Sorry.
That's okay. And so we were both invited to speak there. Dr. Wood was speaking about where did the towers go, and the evidence which shows what happened, basically, and how it happened. And I was speaking about the energy cover-up. And we had somebody there who's actually associated with Stephen E. Jones and openly states that, Sterling Allen, who came and sat in on the presentation. And he became, without going into the details, when Dr. Wood was talking about what's called tritium, which is actually a radioactive substance which should only be seen in nuclear reactions.
Right.
This was found in anomalous levels at the World Trade Center when they analysed. I think it was in the dust, wasn't it? They analysed.
Analysed in the water.
The
water in the basement of.
Right. Okay. So they took some water from the basement and then made some measurements on what substances they found in this water. One of which was this substance called tritium, which is an isotope of hydrogen, and it's radioactive. Normally only produced in nuclear reactions, inside a nuclear reactor when a nuclear bomb's gone off, or this sort of thing.
You have to wonder how it got there.
So you have to wonder how it's got there. And this Sterling Allen character, when this evidence was displayed in this talk, he became quite uncomfortable with this.
Really?
Isn't it quite interesting that this fellow is closely associated with Dr. Stephen E. Jones, who was very much, as you were saying, involved in the cold fusion sort of cover-up in the 80s.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was the proof, and Dr. Wood plays a clip of a chemist called John Bockris, Dr. John Bockris. He said in that clip, when we discovered the tritium, this was the proof that cold fusion really was a nuclear process of some kind.
Right.
And that's what upset all the physicists, because the chemists were saying, we've discovered this fusion process, and the physicists were saying, well, that's impossible because you haven't built a fusion reactor.
And you don't have all the ionizing radiation, the stuff that guidance counters pick up.
Right.
So therefore, you must be bogus. Or they also accused Bockris of spiking his samples with tritium, just dumping tritium in there, because there wasn't
Can't be real.
this other.
Yes. And so what this is essentially it's an energy phenomenon that we're looking at. This proves that it's something to do with a transfer of energy or a transformation of energy in some way.
Yes.
It's we don't understand it. We can see certain patterns and its relationship to John Hutchison's work.
Yes,
He's
indeed.
also done experiments with energy phenomena, and for example, I think some of his samples have displayed evidence of nuclear reactions. Like the other main one in cold fusion is called transmutation. And this is where one element turns into another. You've had palladium electrodes have copper and silver end up in the inside the electrons, atoms of copper and silver. And again, this breaks the laws of physics according to what the physicists say.
Yes, as we currently know them. Can I just add in here, now this is just an aside, but it's a very interesting aside. It's not on the technical scientific side, well, sort of, but it's just very interesting because it involves cold fusion and it involves Jean Malov, and the fact that your I don't know if it's your student, Michael Zebour, who was working with you on proving that aluminium, in fact, did indeed glow red, but also what happened to him, and that he was the nephew of William Zebour, who was working with Dr. Eugene Malov, who was killed, I believe, murdered, I'll say that, in 2004, the day before he was going to present a desktop device in Washington, which I assume would prove
that's the
confusion.
story that we'd heard about Malov. Yes, there are these links, and you can establish them.
I mean, it's
by
just
doing various
interesting
bits of
too because
research.
it involves Dr. Wood.
Right.
The fact that Michael Zebour was working with you.
I'd like to make a correction.
Sure.
It wasn't that we were testing aluminum. That's been a known fact for a couple hundred years.
Yes.
We were demonstrating because I couldn't find any images on the internet.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, when things are hot, they glow. You look inside of a kiln or you
Yes,
fire
of
pottery,
course.
everything's the same color.
Yeah.
Hot things glow.
Yeah.
And aluminum is not an exception, but Stephen Jones was telling us that aluminum is silvery at all temperatures.
Yeah, in daylight conditions.
And he's a
it's
physicist.
Physicist.
And this again was one of these things that he was willing to lie about something, and you could see that this again was perception management. Yeah, and it was important. So he was trying to manage people's perception of those facts, because there was something beneath that which was very revealing, and that again was the energy phenomenon, which you could essentially see was there once you'd studied this evidence and you'd worked out what actually happened.
I just thought it was, too much of a coincidence that this dear soul was working with you on providing, photograph or whatever material you could be photographed, and that his uncle was working with Dr. Eugene Malov, and who was subsequently killed a couple of years prior to Michael Zebour, who was killed in 2006, and that it involved cold fusion, and Michael Zebour himself was interested in the 9/11 issue. So, I mean, it is just...
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people could study that information.
And the Virginia Tech thing. I mean, that's just another thing. That was,
I don't usually like to bring that because I like to keep things with the evidence, not...
I know, but it's just kind of interesting, isn't it? And I just had to mention
again,
it.
if people go and explore those links, they'll be able to
absolutely.
Come to their own conclusion as to what
I just can't help myself.
One thing I do find interesting, getting back to the evidence, a few people realize that what I talk about is just the evidence.
Yes.
And only the evidence. And what turns people off on looking at my work is all these rumors of ray beams from space or space beams, which I don't ever talk about.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people at the energy conference had probably heard that and were turned off of my work.
Oh,
but
right, even at the conference, even with those...
And they listened to my presentation and they turned them around 180 degrees.
Oh, great.
They realized wait a minute, and they saw the connection with the energy conference, and it was
absolutely.
wonderful. It was a wonderful
great.
conference, wonderful opportunity to turn this around, reverse it. But what's also interesting is in 2009, Pons and Fleischmann were vindicated by this 60
Yes.
Minutes
Right.
show where,
Yes.
yes, it is indeed a real phenomenon.
Yeah.
And Fleischmann was asked if he regretted anything. And he said, yes, I regret allowing my colleagues, or my competitor, to call this cold fusion. It's a low energy nuclear reaction.
Right.
It was
yeah.
called cold fusion in the same way that my work is called space beams.
Oh, okay, I see.
And it was
yeah.
by the same person.
So in other words, when you
Interesting.
give something a certain name, that's part of the perception management process.
Yes, indeed, because that gets fixed and locked
Yeah.
in, and it takes quite a bit to change that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
This is because they were assuming that Bacchus was, spiking his sample
Yeah.
because it didn't have the ionizing radiation that high temperature fusion has.
Yes.
Because it's not that type of fusion. It's a different process.
Well, and also, and then we'll come off that topic, the hot fusion, gang, I mean, they draw in gazillions of dollars
A lot of
and,
money, yeah.
and pounds, gazillions, in their research. And I don't think the other energy really does.
I like what you said about Fukushima.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that people like Stephen E. Jones, if you go and look at the evidence of what he's tried to do with this data and this evidence, if you look at what he's actually done, he is essentially set back cold fusion phenomena research or low energy nuclear reactions research
Yeah.
by 20 years.
Yes.
And then if you listen to Pons and Fleischmann, by the end of the 1990s, they had sustained reactions going on in their experimental setup. They were funded by Toyota. I think
Right.
they got their funding pulled.
Yeah.
So I blame people like Stephen E. Jones for what happened at Fukushima, because there is no need for us to be using that technology, and many
No,
other people have said this.
I agree,
But I think
absolutely.
if you couple together what Dr. Wood has unfolded in the study of the World Trade Center destruction,
Yes.
you can see the energy phenomena is real, you can
Yes.
clearly see that it's linked to cold fusion, and you can see the players that are involved. And so somebody has got that knowledge, somebody has engineered that physics, because what happened.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
not a theory. What happened. You can see that from observing the evidence. So those people, Stephen E. Jones, and there are several others around him. I think is it Steve Koonins, one of the other. He was one of the
Yes,
other guys
he
that
was
on
appointed
that
by
voting panel.
He was appointed by Obama, President Obama,
Oh, he was
to
wasn't he,
the
recently, yeah.
Department of Energy.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So oddly, when you look at this, you get the kind of the things on its head. The people in the Department of Energy, they're not interested in free energy.
No.
They're interested
No,
in
that's clear.
maintaining corporate interests and making sure that the thing is, status quo stays the same with energy.
Lovely. Well, thank you for that. We'll be back for part 2 in this section 2 in just a moment. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Judy Wood. Welcome to part 2 of section 2. We're talking with Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood, who's over here from America at the University of Northampton. We're talking about energy, talking about free energy or different energy. I don't know if free energy is the right word for it, but please do continue what we
What
were
I mean
saying.
by free energy is it's free for the taking. You're not stealing. It's
Yeah.
a
But like
new-
Nikola Tesla
Right.
said.
And Nikola Tesla was afraid of. He wanted to give free energy to the world, but he was afraid it would be used for evil purposes.
Yes. Yeah.
Been there, done that. We
Yes.
don't have that risk anymore. It's already been done. Until now, those who developed free energy technology in the secrecy of their basement
Yeah.
have wound up suicided.
Yeah.
The beauty of, if there's any silver lining in this cloud from 9/11, is it was a demonstration to the entire planet that free energy technology exists.
No, I hadn't really thought of it like that, so thanks. Cause
But, but think about it.
Yeah.
Now people can develop it in the light of day,
yeah.
as long as people are aware of that. Until now, folks have had to take some blind faith leap that, oh yeah, I think that person does whatever, or go to somebody's lab and witness this. But with 9/11, the entire planet can know that free energy technology exists.
It's just that we don't know
We've
that
been-
that's what it was.
Right. We've been told, collapse, pile,
Yeah.
terrorists.
Pancakes. Yeah, where's the syrup?
Right, and it's like people learn with flashcards.
Yes.
Instead of with just their eyes.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that, again, takes us to people. I was reading somewhere that there's a figure of something like, is it 40,000 patents that have been held back by the US, just in this case alone?
4,000, I think, is
4,000. Is it only 4,000?
4,000 have been held back for national security reasons.
Yeah, and I understood also, coming full circle on this right to present day, that the I forget his first name, Keshi, the gentleman, the Iranian gentleman, who has brought a technology.
I've looked at that website and so on, listened to Mr. Keshi, and it seems to be a case of jam tomorrow as what my perception of what he's doing is. And in fact, I was looking at this literally, I think, the day before yesterday, and this page where he was claiming where you could reserve one of his power reactors has now been replaced with a page about the book that you can buy.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
I'm really unsure about where that's going.
So maybe this is just sort of the scrabbling about as we get off our knees and onto our
Don't look here, look over here.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
Absolutely.
What we've said in other interviews is that this is the biggest issue of all. This is the big one. What is shown and revealed here by this research is the big one. It's one of the most important things to have been revealed to people in the last probably 2,000 years.
Yes.
I would, I know it might sound it's overstating the case, but I think it is. That's why I'm spending so much time on it.
Yeah. Well, I agree.
It's so important that people understand the implications. And at the end of my energy talk that I did at the conference in Amsterdam, in Hilversum, I have a slide where I display one of these, Marks and Spencer's trucks. It says it says CO2 problem solved because we've streamlined our trucks.
Oh yes.
And it's just completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because that whole CO2 thing is a complete psychological operation.
Yes.
It's perception management on a grand scale.
Absolutely.
And again, it's all derived from people's perception of how we use energy, which has been completely controlled for the last over 100 years.
That's right. And if you think about people, everybody's main bills, it's your mortgage and your utilities. Yeah. So if you didn't have your utilities,
transport, of course. I mean, fuel costs. Fuel costs are huge. I think I heard a thing that more people spend more money on fuel than anything else now.
I know, and that's outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah.
He who controls the energy controls the people.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if we can control our own energy, there's no control over people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see the lengths to which these groups will go by, as you catalogued earlier on, the number of sort of people that have been suicided, murdered, killed, discredited. It's something that I referenced in the talk that I did.
Yes. Well, you've only got to sort of think about, very famous case now, Stan Meyer, with the water car. And he apparently was offered $1 billion by the Saudi lot to not proceed or to buy.
And as he said, it was worth $1 billion to them to keep it covered up.
Yeah.
Because they make, $40 billion a year or something, so it's a 1/40th of their annual income.
Yeah.
You'd be willing to give that away to shut somebody up.
Anyway, he didn't last too long after that, sadly.
Well, I think it was a couple of years after that he was poisoned, and we obviously don't know the exact reason. He said that's what he said as he died. He said he was poisoned.
Yeah.
But now, exposure of this, where I hope that it's changing the game, now. And I genuinely hope that the people that are in the shadow. Somebody was saying to me the other day, "Oh, Andrew, you should be worried about the emails you send out and stuff, because they might be checking on those." And my response is, well, I hope they're reading all my emails, and I hope they're reading them very, very carefully and going and checking the information that we're putting out, and then asking themselves, well, whose side are you on? What do you want this stuff to be kept covered up? Do you want it to be kept as a secret weapon system, or do you want us to have, space travel, anti-gravity technology, infinite free energy, energy healing technology, which we know is available too?
Yes.
Do you want us to have that, or do you want to just carry on with this nonsense of going around killing people and turning buildings to dust?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you yourself had a visit from the.
I did, yes. Actually, that was just after I'd written all these letters, which we were talking about in the break, and I had a couple of guys who said they were from Derbyshire CID. I don't know where they were from, and they were a bit surprised when they came to my house. I think they're expecting to find some crackpot, and I invited them in and offered them a cup of tea, and and
educated them.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I don't know, but they seemed a little bit bemused at what they found, you know, and they couldn't really refute anything that I'd written in these letters, which was essentially based on what the Dr. Wood has now put in her book. That was before the book came out, but you know, they couldn't refute anything. Just like as we said, what Dr. Wood has put in her book, nobody's been able to refute any of it. You know. So.
I tell you what, I just like we haven't covered, and maybe we can have a little chat about this. Is the people who fell or jumped from 9/11 from the buildings there. Some of them appeared to, you know, they didn't seem to be in their normal kind of. They didn't seem right.
It's not normal for people to leave a building that's on fire. What I mean by leave the building, I'm not, just like I don't use the word collapse. We don't know what caused them to go out the windows. But the firefighters around there it must have torn them up because feeling helpless is just so horrible.
Yes,
There's nothing they could do.
Indeed.
And they had never seen so many people jump before. Any fire. I think one had seen one person in all of his career jump from a burning building.
And that's kind of phenomenal statistic as well, isn't it? I mean,
most of them had seen no one ever jump from a burning building.
So, you know, it's kind of, you think, well, what made them do it? What does that tell us about the forces at play on those people? And
we look, and there's no smoke coming out of the windows where they're hanging out. And I focused on the 106th floor, 105th floor. There's all these people kind of hang on the outside of the building. They want to live, they're still hanging there.
Yeah.
And you notice that they've been taking their clothes off, without a shirt, without pants. And then you notice this guy hanging by a hand and a foot, taking his pants off. What would cause someone to hang from the outside of the 105th floor to take their pants off? If there's some weird reason that we don't see that he wants to take his pants off, okay, taking it in, and if inside it's smoky, taking a big deep breath, step inside, take the pants off, and get back out. Why take them off outside? If there's a fire around there, clothing protects you from fire. Firefighters don't fight fires in the nude.
No.
Clothing protects you.
So what do you think could be impacting them? I mean, could microwave factors be involved in any kind of way?
When you look at what's consistent with it, if I were in that building and someone said that it was on fire and I was on the 105th floor, I'd be worrying about losing water pressure. So I'd make a beeline to the bathroom, get myself wet, get my extra clothing wet, wrap around my head, and head for the stairs. Actually, there were some people who did that.
Yeah.
There was a woman who did that, and a couple of stories later, she was out the window. No intention of killing herself. She said to her husband she was going to call him when she got down at the ground level.
Right.
And so you'd be wet. If the fire sprinklers kicked on, you'd be wet. If it was hot and you were sweating, you'd be wet.
Yeah.
So there's a very good chance these people were wet.
Right.
Now, there are some kind of energy fields that affect wet more than dry. Think of a microwave oven.
Yes, yeah.
You know, a wet paper towel cooks and a dry paper towel doesn't.
Yeah.
And think of an active denial system. I'm not saying that is what this is, but this is analogous to it. It's for crowd control. People cannot stand, you know, they fire a microwave beam at a bunch of people and they disperse.
Yes.
They just cannot stand to be in that. And they just have to, you know, like imagine the stove burner on your...
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so hot it's glowing. If you put your hand on it, you don't stop and contemplate, shall I take my hand off? No, your hand flies off of there as reflex. If people are being cooked by a microwave or being fired up by some kind of strong energy field, they're going to get away from it as soon as they, you know, without even thinking.
Yes.
And you look at these people who've left the building.
It does look like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does look like there's some impulse.
And then they went, how am I out? There's one guy who's trying to flap his wings, like, how did I get here? None of them have anything in their hands. And I would think if somebody was choosing to jump, they'd have a picture of the loved one, they'd have their purse, they'd have some kind of identification, something near and dear to them they would have in their hands.
If it was a conscious choice at this, what I want to do, you know, because your last mark on this dimension, in this dimension.
You'd have something with you.
Rather than it being almost an involuntary...
Empty-handed.
Need to, or impulse to.
And other weird things like, there's one fellow who's 100 feet from the building.
I don't understand how that could...
a pant leg or whatever trailing off.
Right. How could that be, do you think?
I calculate if you start from the very top of the building and is jumping, you know, standing broad jump, world record effort from like 1906, 1908.
Right.
Because I'm assuming, you know, those shoes were about the same quality of our shoes now. And the situation, if he went no horizontal wind resistance, just coasted as he dropped, he might barely get to that. That's, world record effort. It's sort of the...
So it's like something's propelled him out?
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
As an effect, like a field effect of some
right,
kind.
Some kind of field effect.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of the hurricane you were talking about before, which has lifted up.
Yes, bingo.
Yeah.
It's consistent with that. We don't have proof of it, but it's consistent with that.
You were talking before, again, about the consistencies that follow through.
Everything is consistent.
This entire thing. And I wonder if we could just perhaps mention some of them just to, consolidate those in people's minds. And perhaps, Andrea, you could come in on this. So the consistencies are things like the dustification that goes in with the...
lack of seismic signal.
The lack of the seismic signal.
Lack of a rubble pile left over.
Right.
Like a busted bathtub.
Yeah, I mean, I still can't get over the rubble.
And that also, you can see in the visual evidence too, both video and still images also show that the, stuff is turning to powder.
And continuing to break down.
And also continue to break down.
And this is sort of a sidebar again, sorry about the, trying to consolidate things a bit, but this dirt that was brought in, have you got any good theories about what that might... Obviously it's dampening down... Well, I say obviously it's dampening down something, but what was it? Because I don't know if anybody really knows that a whole load of earth was trucked in, soil, looked like soil you could grow your vegetables in.
Very nice, rich potting soil.
Yeah.
The various first responders commented that the further down they got, cleaning out the bathtub, the richer the soil became.
I mean,
rich soil coming in.
What?
And when I started noticing these pictures, like, from the 12th and the 13th, right afterwards, you see these clumps of dirt in the ground, like a wheelbarrow just dumped a pile of dirt. It didn't fall into a pile with clean material around it. It was definitely brought in and dumped. And in 2007, I witnessed dirt trucks bringing dirt in and piling it up.
Right. Still in 2007?
2007. And then, stirring around another dirt truck taking it out.
So 6 years later, there are still some field effects going. Do you think
something's
going on? I mean, we don't know exactly what it is, but the thing that we've discussed before was if you've got a chemical spillage, then that's peat. One reason to bring peat or soil in to soak up the...
Okay, yes, yeah.
But another reason would be if you've got, if we look at the energy phenomenon again, if there's a residual energy effect going on in the loose material on the ground, such as, for example, Dr. Wood's book has described how the dust became finer and finer and finer. It was initially quite coarse, and then it became finer.
I hadn't actually realised that before.
And then it actually lifted off the ground because it's so fine. It became lighter than air. So if that process was still going on in some of the other material that was still on the ground, and whatever was on the ground, whatever was there, then if you pile soil on top of it, then it's going to sort of soak up some of that material, however it's degrading or whatever is happening to it. And then, you need to change that because the soil itself would then become contaminated maybe after, I don't know, a week. I think you noticed a weekly cycle, I think, when we discussed that before.
I'm not sure what the cycle is. It seemed like it was just kind of ongoing in different areas. They're bringing dirt here while dirt was getting pulled out.
So there definitely seemed to be a cyclic process, though, where they were bringing it in and then taking it out. So it seemed like, as you said, changing diapers or changing nappies, as we'd say here. So, there's clearly something going on with that, but obviously, again, we don't know the full details, but when we spoke to John Hutchison, he suggested that that's what happens with his samples.
Oh, really?
And there's been studies written up about that I've referenced, where the more quantity of the material that's affected, the statement is that it's less self-quenching.
Yes, okay, I understand that.
It doesn't stop itself. And what was interesting about the nuclear test way back when, that the very first nuclear test, the folks deciding to go forward with it knew that the scientists did not know if it would be self-quenching, if it would stop.
Right, yeah.
But they went ahead with that testing.
Yeah.
They thought the nuclear action had a possibility of going on after the main bomb had gone off.
And
then just on and on.
I mean, weren't you... I don't know if it was when you visited in 2007, because did you go as well, Andrew?
I went to New York in 2008.
2008.
Judy, yeah.
But were there? Am I correct in thinking that there were still people with hazmat suits on there?
Yes. Yes. So and I videoed them hosing down the site.
Phenomenal. Still in 2008.
Yeah, 2008.
In October 2007, we have some photographs of They have, keep things behind the gate where you can't see it, and they're opening the gate where they're with the camera. And here's one of these dirt trucks leaving, and they're hosing it down very carefully, completely hosing it down.
On leaving?
Yeah, inside the gate.
Out of the gate.
It comes out of the gate, goes up about a block, and stops. The driver pops out, and somebody else pops in and drives the truck further.
I mean, it really is just incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean it is the whole thing. It really is amazing when
Yeah.
you look at it.
Yeah.
And the cover up as well. I mean,
And how easy it is to cover these things up.
Absolutely.
Well, let's
Because
pick
it's
up
very
this
effective.
in our final segment. Thank you, Dr. Judy Wood
Thanks.
and Andrew Johnson. And welcome back to part 3 of section 2. We're here with Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood with a fascinating discussion on 9/11, the energy issues and what it means with management perception thrown in just for good measure. We're going to pick that bit up right now, Dr. Judy Wood. So talking about perception, we're rolling that along and rolling that on, and we've seen how that's panned out. Well, I have said some of how that's been panned out by the different laws that have been passed and the Patriot Act and things like that. And we've seen, I'm sure Andrew will say again, some of the things that have been going on in the UK, no different, following suit. So again, all of this is this kind of holding, controlling and dumbing and this blinkered aspect. How can we get the 9/11 issue to break through that? Can you see that happening?
Yes.
Good.
If folks can focus on learning good problem-solving skills of what happened, because what happened, the building turned into powder in midair. So if any other scenario that folks are concerned with doesn't address that evidence, it's a distraction. It's like a magic show. And,
so that's the thing,
yeah.
just to absolutely stay...
Focus on
I
the
guess-
evidence, and the evidence will show you what happened.
Yeah.
And once you know what happened, you realize that all of the other stuff going on is irrelevant. It doesn't apply to this problem. You have to define a problem in order to solve it. And what has been done is a problem has been assumed, and that assumed problem does not apply.
I think what we've discussed privately before why Dr. Judy's book is so important. There's two main reasons really. One is the evidence of 9/11. But I think, as we've discussed, when you go through that process of studying it, it actually teaches you a new way of thinking, or it sort of shows you a new way of thinking. It teaches you, it gives you back much more critical thinking skills.
Yes.
And one of the things that you
Empowers.
Dr. Wood
the
said
reader.
is that you take responsibility for, reading the information. And one of the things we found, we've commented this as well, that people have to actually take responsibility for having read this book. It really is like that. It's like no other book. You have to take responsibility for having read it.
And they feel
understanding
empowered.
it.
The person ends up feeling empowered throughout the book.
I have to say, I absolutely agree with that, because I dipped in and out of your book, Andrew, before, and I'd seen interviews or listened to interviews both, in fact. But when I read this, and and although not everything stuck, some main points, salient points have stuck, and it's absolutely underpinned everything. Because I have to say, you've got a great skill in making it extremely understandable to the non-scientist.
Thank
I'm
you.
a total layperson, wouldn't understand a lot of complex issues, but the basics, it's obvious and it's so well explained.
There's something else I've learned about it that I hadn't anticipated this, that made it even more powerful. People have pride. They have egos.
Yes.
And to admit that they were duped on 9/11,
they
they can't admit that to somebody else, but it's just them in the book.
Yes.
They have nobody to feel embarrassed in front of.
Yeah.
They can work through and get empowered, and they no longer feel taken over.
I think the thing is as well is, where does this take us as well? So I've read the book, so I really do feel empowered by knowing that the NIST report was fraudulent, and all the things that we've already discussed. I know those, as far as I'm concerned, that they're a fact. But where can I go with that?
If enough people read this book in the next couple of weeks, everything would change.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole new sort of situation you're looking at, really. As I alluded to before, that is all real, but it depends really on how many people become aware of the information. And
That's right.
we've also talked about things like that.
And why it's important.
Yeah, and you know, I have sort of, some days I think, oh well, you know, it's going to break through now, and we're going to get a wider sort of understanding of what's shown, what has been shown. But then, you know, other times you'll meet somebody in the street and they just have absolutely no idea of anything about, you know, what the truth of 9/11 is. They've just seen, you know, what they've seen on the TV, and they just don't realise what sort of effect that's had on their mind.
I must say, if there was no other evidence but, let's say, the bathtub and the seismic evidence,
you don't need it anymore.
I tell you what, I don't need any more personally. And what that made me do, well, it kind of had a little mini explosion in my head, which was, you know, I wasn't that close, but it kind of blew any, you know, kind of closure right off the hinges, to totally understand that it's a 360-degree cover-up. All the developed countries across the globe, they're in it together, and, you know, they really don't want us knowing. And, you know, we're pushing the boat out here.
What I like to ask is, you know, those who planned 9/11, do you think they just forgot to plan a cover-up?
Yeah, and I mean, that's, you know, that's again what I've looked into is the cover-up itself, and it becomes quite, you know, soul-destroying really, because it's almost like, you know, if people have seen that film Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where, you know, the person sort of turns into an alien, but outwardly there's no difference.
Yes.
And it's like when you confront people with this information, some people really digest it and it changes. It just, you know, I've had people, we've had people say, read Dr. Wood's book, read Andrew Johnson's book, they'll change your life, you know, completely.
Yes. Yeah.
And then other people just. Somebody wrote on an Amazon review, oh, because I give my book away free on an electronic version. It's, oh, free is still too much. Giving it away free, it still costs too much. That's what they've written on review. So you get this sort of complete opposites of reviews. Yeah. But
it illuminates something.
Yeah, it illuminates something that's going on, and that goes back to the human consciousness thing that Dr. Wood referenced earlier on. There's some kind of self-sorting or self-organising process going on. Yes. And there are a number of things which I think feed into that, but 9/11 is certainly a very, very big one.
Did you find that the Breakthrough Energy Conference in Holland in just this month in November, did anything really come from that, from your presentation? I know you said some people got, you know, back on board, which that in itself is fantastic. But do you see that unit, for example, moving through with breaking through energetically with anything more?
I found that the people who spoke to me felt like this changed their whole outlook on things. It's a way of thinking, is realizing how we've been kind of led around by a string someplace, or you know, following breadcrumb trails. But you're free of that. See what's in front of you. Don't wait to be told what to see.
I mean, I have a hope that, you know, one of the things at the energy conference was that, you know, there's kind of a very sort of positive thing, breakthrough energy, we're all going to have free energy. Yeah. But without an understanding of this, you're not really going to get very far. So my hope is that by this actually being part of the conference, that as this information is coming out, you know, people might say, you know, people have said to me, well, if you know what you and Dr. Wood said was true, you'd both be dead. You know, and obviously we're not.
Not if we're marginalised.
So we do think that there is some underlying thing which, you know, they could have stopped the book coming out. They could have sunk the ship.
Do you think it's their arrogance, though? They are just so sure.
I don't know. There's something else other than that. I mean, you know, obviously I'm theorising and speculating and so on.
Yes, sure.
But from my gut feeling, there is something else going on, and this is a key part of a positive process, even though the event itself is horrific.
Yes.
And everything that goes with it, and you look at, and some of the chapters in that book, as you know, Joanna, very uncomfortable to read, particularly one about the jumpers. I suppose I'm thinking of more than any other.
Yes.
And so you've got all that to deal with, and I suppose if you can deal with all that and come out of the other end of it, you, as you say, you're empowered as a person, and you've got to look at things in a different way. And I, you know, somebody has engineered this. Somebody's been able to engineer this physics. And so we do have to realise that we're you and I and the people sitting in this room, we're not part of that group. We're not party to that information.
No.
There is a completely separate group
But we can figure it out.
But we've
Yes.
got the information
Well-
available to us to figure it out.
Again, with people like John Hutchison, you know,
Right,
who are that
right.
wonderful, wonderful man, and there have to be others, more John Hutchisons around, who are seeing this too and coming
hope so.
forward. And I don't know what it will. I don't know how. I can't quite see how things will move anytime soon.
But they will, I can tell you that. You know
Good.
why?
Great.
You know why? Because,
Good.
you know, the various, people spit on me and all sorts of rumors get started around all this garbage. Why would they have to do that if it was in the bag? That shows we have a chance.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. And my feeling is that you know, somebody made a deal somewhere. This group had to make a deal that they had to let this information come out. This group, whoever, I don't know who the group is. It's given various names. But
Yeah.
I've said this before on some interviews. Again, it's completely my own speculation.
Yeah.
But you know, this information is coming out. It's coming out in sort
It is,
of
it's
slightly
leaking
strange
out
ways,
all
but
over the
it
place.
is coming out. And you know, we've been doing these talks and we're getting some very positive reactions.
Yeah.
And the same happened last year as well. So it is coming out.
And the folks in England, I found, are remarkable.
I was just going to ask you what's been the response.
In England, it's been wonderful and just amazing. Compared to other places I've been, people seem more sure of who they are.
Right.
And
that's interesting.
secure, so they can take in new information and see it and think about it.
That's interesting too. I hadn't ever thought of us lot of kind of in those terms.
Less sheep-like.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, we
think
can
also
be a
one-
bit of a feisty lot, can't we?
Well, I think one thing that I've observed is that, you know, the British understatement of many things, and Dr. Wood's presentations, as if you watch them, see sort of mainly a lot of understatement. It's just, here's the evidence, you know, here's what's
Yes.
there. Look at this. And it's
No
not like,
shouting
you
or
know, your
whatever.
Alex Jones
No, banging the
rah
drum
rah
thing.
rah and thump
Yeah.
the table, and we've got to get these people.
Did
you
he
know.
ever talk about your work at all?
Alex Jones?
To this
No,
day?
No.
No?
Well,
I can't imagine why.
he has spoken about it, but
Oh,
But
right.
he
Yeah.
refers to me by a different name than my name.
Oh, I see. Okay. Did you get much response from your Coast to Coast, which is a very popular American radio station? Did you get much response after you
Yes,
spoke
yes,
there?
I did. Some people, that's the first they'd ever heard of me.
Oh,
many
really?
of them, many people.
Right. It is. Doesn't that just go to show you just how deep this cover up
But
is?
whatever hosts have me on, and you better be ready for this, but especially in the U.S., a host that'll have me on, who hadn't had me on before,
Yeah.
suddenly gets, you know, covered, immersed in all of these emails saying, oh, you're discrediting yourself by having her on, you know, this mistake, she's been disproved, and
Listen, in the field I'm in,
Yeah.
we already.
there's just a pile of this stuff that comes out, and often
Yeah.
a host will just not have me on again because they don't want to go there. They don't want to have.
Oh, that's
their
never going to happen with us.
listeners upset.
We're too far down the rabbit hole for all of that nonsense.
And there's one particular person that has really impressed me, who has spoken out of about my work.
Oh, right.
Is Jesse Ventura.
Oh yes,
And
yeah, fantastic.
he's about the only person out there who has talked about my work and never made a mistake.
Oh really? Yeah. Have you actually met?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, that's lovely because he's a very colourful character and has very persuasive vocal talents.
And I think he really wants truth and honesty in our culture.
Yeah. Well, great. And wouldn't that be a nice thing for a change? Gosh. So how do you said you're very hopeful that things will change and soon. So we're in 2012 and, you know, it's a bit of an iconic year. Who knows what it means, 21st, 12.
I'm not
12,
promoting this
but-
book because, you know, it's my book and I want to sell it. It's actually sold just about at cost.
Yes. No, it's great. I tell you,
To prove it,
wonderful.
go look at the used prices on Amazon. They're about 2 or 3 times the price
Really?
of
Already?
the new one.
Hey,
Yeah.
you're doing well.
But if you want to borrow one from the library or get one and then loan it to your friends, that's fine. But just reading the material, it's expensive to produce because it's got over 800 color photos.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful, and we'll get some pictures of that, and along
But
with
just
Andrew's
getting
book.
as many people to read it.
Yeah,
to
are you
understand it.
still? Do you still send them out, Andrew? Have you? Because I know you did have some of the books.
We don't have any UK stock left.
Right,
Because
okay.
the
Well, that's
stock
good
that we
news.
got.
Need to restock.
Yeah, we need to restock basically,
Yeah.
which we may do in the near future. But so that's something that's currently under review, shall we say.
Okay. So just to pick up again about what do you think we can expect from this, new awareness, new education, or enough people becoming aware of this material?
I think it's going to be more and more difficult to tell truth from falsehoods.
Okay.
And so it's going to become more and more important for people to be able to sort through it themselves as to what is what. And once they learn to do that, they're empowered.
Okay. Well, listen, we're coming to the end of a really fascinating show, and I really do thank you very much for coming along and chatting with us. And I'd just like you and Andrew perhaps to have the last 2-3 minutes words that will, kind of seal it for us about the truth above 9/11 and where it's going to take us.
Well, go ahead. I'd like to thank you for having us on and for caring about this subject.
Oh, I do.
That's the biggest thing. And for your listeners for caring enough to listen to the show, because caring about this planet and where we're going is what it's all about.
And for the human race. It's no smaller.
There's a lot at stake here.
There is a lot at stake. And I think we're on a pivotal point myself. I think we're on that axis.
I fully agree.
Tipping point. And I don't know about you, Andrew. We're just wrapping up the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, just if people want to follow this up, checktheevidence.com is my website, drjudywood.com. You'll find a lot of the information on there. It's obviously it's all free and download whatever you like.
Yeah. And
there's various other interviews that we've done which will cover some of the points we haven't had chance to fully explore here. And the book that I've written is free on Kindle, iPad, EPUB.
Just
PDF.
Remind me what it's called again.
It's called 9/11 Finding the Truth.
Right.
So people
it's a compilation book as well, is it? I believe.
Yes, it's essentially a compilation of articles, and there's an audio version as well that people can download.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to thank you enormously for your work, Dr. Wood. Without you, I wouldn't be so enlightened or empowered, and I can only hope that many, many more people read this book. And I'm not selling it, folks. I just think it's amazing, and I've learned an awful lot. And Andrew, I have to thank you again for introducing me. And I'd just like to say this is the MASH Field Report over at Northampton University. And Dr. Judy Wood's about to go and give her talk, and I'd like to thank her again, and Andrew, and Miles, the wonderful Miles Johnston, basins and upwards. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, listening, watching.